Hi, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do another book haul. I got the book buying bug, plus it's the beginning of the year and I always buy books to go in my classroom library. And so that's what we have here. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about are the books that I got at this book sale that the local literacy association puts on. They call it the really good, really big, really cheap book sale. They take donations all throughout the year, and then they put on this big sale in an old former mall where their offices are, and all of the money goes back to the Literacy Association. Every time I unhaul books, that's where I take them, because I am firmly committed to the idea of building literacy. So first, we have Fablehaven. I haven't read it yet, and I don't know much about it, but I've heard good things about it. So this will go in my classroom library after I read it. Next we have The Curse of the Blue Tattoo. I believe it's book 3 in the Bloody Jack Adventures of Female Pirate. I loved reading these several years ago and I saw this there. I don't care that it's not the first in the series. I still really like it. Then we have The Supernaturalist, an Ian Colfer book. It's a school where troubled boys with powers, go off and they're kept there, kept out of trouble, and then the main character basically gets into trouble and tries to overthrow the system. Next we have The Picture of Hollis Woods. So Hollis Woods is a foster child and has been through the ringer in the system. She ends up in a really good placement with someone who really loves her, but this woman is losing her memory, and so Hollis tries to do whatever she can to make sure that social services doesn't find out, because if they did, they'd remove her from the home. Next we have Gifts by Ursula Guin. I haven't read this one. I think I've heard good things about this author, so this is going to go in my classroom library as soon as I've read it. Next we have Out of the Dust. It takes place during the Great Depression, specifically the Dust Bowl, and Billy Joe, the protagonist, is having to deal with all the fallout from that and also her mother's tragic death and what it does to her dad. Last of the haul from the book sale, we have Fever 1793. This takes the reader through the yellow fever epidemic that swept through Philadelphia in 1793. Really good. It's by Laurie Halse Anderson. She's one of my favorite young adult authors. Next we have an entire series. I'm going to go through this really quickly because it's very popular. A lot of people know about this series. When I discovered this for about $15 to $20, the entire series, I had to buy it. Turns out it's the UK edition, which I just find cool because it's not a common edition. And that is the Artemis Fowl series. I love Artemis Fowl. I just think it's a spectacular concept, and Colfer did a really good job building the world. Artemis Fowl, The Arctic Incident, The Eternity Code, Opal Deception, Lost Colony, Time Paradox, Atlantis Complex, The Last Guardian. Alright, the next thing I'm going to go through quickly are the books from this year's SC ASL list that I talked about in a previous video. Ephraim Divided, again, one of my all-time favorites. I will link that video in the description or up in the corner if I can figure out how to do that. Don't Date Rosa Santos, Black Brother, When the Stars Are Scattered. I realized that I forgot to talk about this one because it was one of the first ones that I read from the list. This is fantastic. I really love this. This is actually the book that's on both the middle grades list and the children's book list. It is a graphic novel which tells the story, the real life story of two young boys who are living in a refugee camp, and when they had to flee their village, they got separated from their mom. So it's just these two young boys living on their own and being taken care of by this lady that they call their substitute mom, and she just happens to be in the tent next door. Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky. Again, another book that I forgot to talk about This is this is my first introduction to the Rick Riordan Presents imprint, where, Riordan is famous for his Percy Jackson series. This imprint publishes books that do a similar thing to Percy Jackson, only with all sorts of different cultures that don't get the amount of representation that they need. And if this is any indication of the types of books that are in that imprint, I'm going to read and own every single book in that imprint. In this book, Tristan Strong, he's a boxer, middle school, and he just suffered the loss of his best friend. There's a school bus accident. He blames himself for it. It's the end of the year, and his parents send him to spend the summer with his grandparents down south. Along the way, he discovers that the journal has started glowing, which he finds quite odd. Oh, the journal of his friend, that he hasn't touched yet because, he feels guilty for his friend's death. Journal starts glowing. That's a little weird. And then the inciting incident happens when this strange little gumball type creature, gum baby, comes in and steals the journal. Of course, this means a lot to him, so he's not going to let her do that. And so he chases her, ends up punching a hole in the sky and falling into another world. And they're all connected. And this book, oh my word, it is absolutely fantastic. It weaves together West African mythology along with African American folklore all throughout in this world. So you've got people like Anansi, West African folktale, and you've got Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox, and you've got John Henry. When we got to the end and it revealed who the haint was that Tristan accidentally let out of the bottle tree when he punches the hole in the sky, oh, so good. I had forgotten how much I love this book, but this is amazing. Revenge of the Red Club, The Only Black Girls in Town, Kent State, Dancing at the Pity Party, Stamped, Jane Anonymous. And in Jane Anonymous, you never know the character's actual name. She's writing it as if her name is Jane Anonymous. And she was, it's a then and now, and it starts in the now where she has escaped and been taken home after being held captive for 8 months. And it flips back. The then is when she's being held captive. And she develops this sort of Stockholm syndrome. Sort of. It's complicated. But the now reveals the lasting effects that things like this have on a person's psyche. And that, oh, she's home. Oh, she's all better. No, she's got all sorts of trauma to still work through. So we start off with The Night Diary. This, I believe, was on last year's list. It tells the story of Nisha, who is Hindu but living in the area now known as Pakistan during the time of partition, which, if you know anything about that history, millions of people were uprooted, hundreds and thousands of people were killed. But this tells the story of what happens when her father decides it's too dangerous for them as Hindus to stay in Pakistan, and so they up and move. And a lot of the violence happened because you knew if there were travelers leaving your area, they were leaving because they were the opposite religion. And so they were targeted for violence. Next we have The Miscalculations of Lightning Girl. Lucy Callahan survived being struck by lightning, but it did change her. It altered her brain in a way, it makes her really, really good at math, but not so great at emotional interactions. She's so smart that she has finished all of her work and could go to college. Her grandma says, no, you're going to experience a year of middle school. The Girl Who Drank the Moon. I originally read this summer thinking it was part of the list, but it wasn't. I don't care. It's still an amazing book. Every year, the people in this city, they call the protectorate, they take the youngest child And they take that child, leave them outside in this special area for the witch. And it's a sacrifice because if the witch devours this one child, then everybody else is safe. And it quickly becomes known, wait, this is a way of people, of someone, who is that someone? They don't know, gaining control over all the people in this town. And the title girl, her mother fought back. Now, normally these people give up their children easily. This woman did not. And it impacted one of the people who was there, who was an elder in training. It impacted the girl. When the witch picks her up, she doesn't eat the children like the people in the city are told. She takes them to the other side of the forest, gives them good homes, etc. She accidentally feeds the child moonlight instead of starlight, and in this world, moonlight and magics. And there's just, it's a lovable tale. It's a very soft magic system. And you learn all sorts of things as you go through. But all of these characters are so lovable. From the teeny tiny dragon who thinks he's a huge dragon and that everyone that he's around, they must be giants because he's huge. And if they're bigger, they're giants. No, he's tiny. Hilarious. There's also a bog monster. A very lovable bog monster. There's the witch. There's the people in the protectorate. There's that elder in training. There's the girl's mother who is put up in the tower. I'm talking too long about this. Really, really, really good book. I adored it. Next we have The Bridge Home. It's set in India, and these two girls, one of them is developmentally delayed, the sister of the protagonist. They come from a home where the father is abusive and the mother doesn't do anything to protect them. And so the older sister realizes, I have to leave. I have to get us out of here for our own safety. But the thing is, they have nowhere to go. And so living on the streets, living under a bridge is safer than living in their home. Then we have the young reader's version of I Am Malala. We have a sorcery of I say that wrong every time. A sorcery of thorns. The magic is kept in libraries, and there's secrecy around different aspects of the libraries, and this girl is figuring things out, and something gets released and there's chaos and she's involved. It's really good. You know, I'm just gonna stop saying it's really good because I wouldn't own the books if it weren't really good. Next we have Codename Verity. Codename Verity, I believe again, was on last year's list. In Codename Verity, Verity, not her actual name, is captured. She's a spy. She's young. I believe she's about 17, so this is young adult, not middle grades. And she's captured, and she's telling this story through her interrogations. And so there's some of it where she's just putting stuff on and hiding things because she's being interrogated. But there's the truth comes out throughout it, and it's a mixture of things. And I found it absolutely fascinating and really gripping in how she deals with the psychological trauma that she endures of being captured and tortured. Next we have Phoenix Rising. I found this a fascinating setup because this was written in the 90s, so a lot closer to things like Chernobyl. And the setup here is there's been a massive catastrophic nuclear accident at a power plant very close to where they live. And all of the fallout went in the opposite direction. But there's all sorts of things that affect their lives because of the fallout. And the fallout has left Boston completely empty. And the fallout from that is really intriguing in how people respond. And there's actually a couple of things, a couple times where they talk about masks, the masks that they wore to prevent, I don't know, something because of the radiation, and people's responses to those masks. Like, did you write this last year? Yeah. So I read the back to see if I could remember this, but this is one of those books that I read a long time ago. and I don't remember a lot about, but I rated it 5 stars, and if I rated it 5 stars, it must be good. And it's Heaven by Angela Johnson. So in the honest truth, this was another, I believe this was on the 2019 list, and there have been 2 Dan Reinhardt books. Sorry, Gemeinhart. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his name. There have been 2 of his books on the list, and I found this one profoundly affecting because Mark, the main character, he's dying. He's a young kid, he's dying, and he doesn't know really how to deal with it, and so he runs away. And this book is him coming to terms with his death and what that means, and processing it as he's running away and trying to survive out in the wilderness. So these 2 books I read so long ago, I have the foggiest idea of what they're about, but they were absolute favorites. I checked them out over and over and over from the library. You've got Island of Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell, and you've got The Music of Dolphins by Karen Hess, the same author as Phoenix Rising. I didn't know if I would still like her books 9 years after I read them, or 20 something years after I read them. I definitely do. So everything else in the universe is set in the years as the Vietnam War is waning and just after. Lucy is dealing, she loved her dad. And then her dad went away to war and came back a very different man. And she doesn't know how to deal with that. She's only 12. And she absolutely loved him. They did everything together. And now he's come back and he's missing an arm. And he's completely psychologically changed. And this is the book where she's figuring out how to deal with that. The benefits of being an octopus. I believe this book was on last year's list. And in this book, Zoe, she doesn't come from a lot of money. There's a lot that she's responsible for. There's a lot. She has to take care of her younger siblings. Her mom works odd shifts. They live in a trailer. And she's dealing with all of that daily life and going to middle school. And then someone wants to get her in the debate club. And she's just like, it would be a lot more beneficial if I had 8 arms like an octopus and I could figure out how to deal with all of this. I think this is a really good look at what kids have to deal with when they live in poverty. And I think it's something that a lot more teachers need to be very aware of. Okay, so 6 of Crows. This is very popular in the BookTube universe. I enjoyed it, and I thought it was an intriguing concept, and I thought that Kaz was a very complex character, and what he went through as he's building this team to take on this heist. I thought it revealed a lot more nuances than a lot of this type of young adult fantasy that I've read. Second to last, we have Clap When You Land. Oh my word. I love Elizabeth Acevedo's work. Elizabeth Acevedo, I first read her work with the poet X, and then I read Clap When You Land, and the name of her third book is escaping me. She is one of those very few authors that if I see she's published a new book, I am buying it right then. I can't believe it took me this long to get this one. In Clap When You Land, you have Camino and Yaira. They both have the same dad. He goes back and forth between the Dominican Republic and New York City. And he has a family in both places. And they actually don't know about each other. But then the plane that he's on when he's going to the Dominican to see Camino, it crashes and he dies. And in that, there's the unraveling of the 2 separate families that he kept. I think a handful of the family members knew about each other, but not the daughters. You see an unraveling of that, and you see this struggle for identity for both of these girls, and what does it mean for this dad that I thought was my dad alone. What does this mean that I have to share him with this other person? What does that mean for his identity? How does that change how I see him? And there's so much more that's going on in this. And I just adore Elizabeth Acevedo's work. When I saw there's a graphic novel version of Long Way Down, I had to buy it. It's already at the top of my all-time favorite list. So this book spans the time of an elevator ride. He is having to deal with the death of his brother, and is he going to avenge him? And these various characters, are they figments of his imagination? Are they there? It's left up to you to decide. But these characters come in at each floor and they give him some information and prompt him to think. I was gonna say something else, but I can't say it because that's spoilers. So there you have it. Let me count them. So there you have it. The 41 books that I am taking into my classroom library to start off this 2021-22 school year. Sounds like I'm saying the last one, but it's the 21-22 school year. And I'm really excited about it.